Never was it more obvious that a fake narrative is being peddled and all other versions either censored or the people involved subject to abuse and dismissal and slurs than the two stories that have dominated the news in recent times, which is the alleged chemical attack in Syria and the alleged nerve agent attack in Salisbury, England, on the former Russian agent, actually double agent. He was working for British intelligence, and his daughter. Both official stories are so full of holes. It's almost excruciating to watch. And this week we have seen this barrage and deluge of lies from every direction. And when the odd voice in politics, like the Labour Party opposition leader in Britain, Jeremy Corbyn, not the rest of his party, by the way, who are next to frickin' useless. Well, they're not next to useless, they're useless. But when he has asked for evidence and questioned the legality of the 100 missiles fired at Syria on the basis of a lie, then he's shouted down not only by the government party, which gives new meaning to the word pathetic, by the way, but then so does his own party, who also trying to undermine him and say they're disgusted with the fact that he could question the official story. This is the Labour Party in Britain that was officially created to challenge the establishment and to represent working class people who were being, and still are, abused by the establishment. But of course what happens is they get sucked in, and we now have a Labour Party, apart from one or two members more at the core, that has been absorbed by the establishment, has become the establishment. And that was so easy to see this week as Labour Party opposition, quotes, working class representatives, what a joke, members of Parliament, said, well, yeah, we should have been consulted before Theresa May, the Prime Minister, agreed to go with Trump and fire those missiles at Syria. But we don't question the fact that it was the right thing to do. Only we should have made the decision. And it was a real head shaker. There is no opposition in Britain, just as there is no opposition in the United States, for example. Now, people will, might say, well, that's a strange thing to say, because the Democrats and the progressive mindset that's hijacked the traditional left that I grew up with, they're opposing Trump. Well, yeah, but that's a sideshow. That's the vaudeville. They're not overwhelmingly, in terms of the Democratic politicians, challenging this US foreign policy of using the military to intervene in other sovereign countries. Because that's what Obama did, the progressives' hero. And Trump is just continuing the same, just as Obama continued on what Boy George Bush did in his presidency. Not that he made any decisions. And this hidden hand agenda for the Middle East has continued under all of them. And so basically, I've been saying for a long, long time that what we call democracies are actually, in effect, one-party states. And now we're more and more seeing it. You look at the Republican Party and you look at the Democratic Party, and you're seeing the fusion in America very clearly into a full-blown, in-your-face public arena one-party state. And we've had the usual absolute crap this week. This is the quote of the week for me from Donald Trump announcing the airstrikes on Syria based on a lie. Britain, France, and the United States have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism and brutality. What? They fired at themselves, have they? Righteous power. This is the madness. This is the psychopathic insanity that we're dealing with. The belief that you are righteous, you are the good guys, even though you are collectively, those three countries, Britain, France, the United States, responsible for untold mayhem, death, destruction, and slaughter across the Middle East. You are the righteous power. And because you're the righteous power, and interestingly, this mentality is also seen in this whole progressive mentality, which I'll come to in a second, the connection to that. But once you think you have righteous power, then you can do what you like. And anyone that tries to question you or challenge you, they are not righteous, and therefore what they say is irrelevant. Because you're righteous, I am right. As I say in the new book, the only right is I am right. And if you look at the mentality of the progressive mindset, you see the same thing. This is why we have moved into the post-fact society where facts don't matter. Because the progressive mindset believes that it is right and it is righteous. And thus it can dismiss any other opinion except its own and agree and even campaign for the silencing and censorship of any opinion other than its own, because it is right. And this, of course, righteous mentality was behind all the horrors that religion has perpetrated on the world through the centuries, because these religious nutters, these clinically insane people that ran the Inquisition and run the extreme Islamic mentality, they believe they are right, and because they are, if you like, agents of their God, and therefore special. Where have you heard that before? We are the chosen people of God. Then whatever they do is righteous, no matter how grotesque. And this is the mindset, clearly, from that quote that was behind the, war criminal attacks on Syria. And why? Because they want rid of Assad as part of a much wider global agenda. And Israel's right in there. His fingerprints are all over it. Because Israel has had a long plan to balkanize the Middle East, break up the countries of the Middle East into ethnic and religious factions, and therefore take control of the wider Middle East. And what's been standing in their way is Syria. Libya was also, and Gaddafi was also a bulwark against that, and as therefore they got rid of him, thanks to righteous Obama and righteous France and righteous Britain. And the next on the list was Syria and Assad. Now, because the Russians came in to support Assad, that threw a massive spanner in that works. And now they are trying to find another way of getting rid of Assad and balkanizing the Middle East, breaking up Syria into factions. And you're seeing the land that the American military occupy is not planned to be given back, and will be held as part of this balkanization process. And it's also not without or not a coincidence that the area of Syria occupied by the American military and its allies just happens to be where most of the Syrian oil and water supplies are, and control of that area obviously has a major impact, therefore, on the ability of the wider Syria and the Damascus-based Syria to function, which is the whole idea. But there's another development this week, which is part of this balkanization. The headline on davidicke.com was war criminal and arch neocon Bolton in contact with Arab states to create regional force in Syria, says report. Now, John Bolton, who is the psychopath's psychopath and was involved with centrally involved with the Project for the New American Century, which drew up this list, these neocons of extreme Zionists that drew up this list of regime change countries in September 2000, the ones that have been ticked off ever since. He's just been appointed the US National Security Advisor to Trump. And immediately after his appointment, the missiles were unleashed on Syria. That's not a coincidence either. The man is, again, clinically insane. But this story says John Bolton, US President Donald Trump's new National Security Advisor, is spearheading a push to establish a coalition of Arab military forces in Syria to pave the way for an American withdrawal, according to reports. The White House is considering putting a compelling reward on the table in order to convince Arab states like Saudi Arabia to deploy forces to Syria, CNN reported, citing a source close to the White House. The idea of creating an Arab force recently gained traction after Trump declared earlier this month that he wanted American troops out of Syria very soon and have other countries take care of it. The United States, in particular, is enlisting assistance from Egypt, Bahrain. Egypt, they massively fund in terms of weapons aid development money. Bahrain, another terrorist state that is a tyranny imposing the will of a fake royal family on the rest of the population. Jordan, a vassal state of the United States and of Israel. Kuwait, same in terms of the United States at least. Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are just a disgusting expression of humanity, and again run by psychopaths and fake royals who are vassals again of the United States. And Syria and Saudi Arabia is fast becoming a obvious, it was in the background anyway, but obvious vassal of Israel with the emergence of this crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who is actually running Saudi Arabia, the King Salman, official monarch, just a puppet and a figurehead. I include in the new book the connections between the emergence of Mohammed bin Salman as crown prince when there were others in front of him at one point in the succession, and they kind of died very conveniently to allow him to be crown prince, and how he is a puppet of the United States and of Israel, and that has come from a one-time member of the Saudi royal family who got so sick of it, so sick of the corruption, that he fled, and I think he now lives in Germany. The story goes on. The US and its regional allies have backed militants opposed to the Syrian government since the conflict broke out in 2011. In fact, they orchestrated the so-called militants to start the civil war, to unseat Assad, just as they did the same in Libya to remove Gaddafi. Now, because these Arab states are simply vassals of the United States, any occupation of Syria by these Arab countries like Saudi Arabia is actually American occupation, an Israeli occupation. That's what it is. And it, if they do go through with this, it gives the opportunity of the American administration to say, oh, look, we know we've come out and left the country, but they haven't. Their vassals are running it on their behalf because they have bigger fish to fry, because this is not the end of it. They want Lebanon, they want Iran, and eventually they want Russia, and they want China. In fact, the fact that they are looking for a conflict with Russia, which I've been talking about since the 1990s, is now becoming patently obvious. Now, if we look at the other developments this week in terms of the claims of a chemical attack, I watched a little girl, a 7-year-old, being interviewed about the chemical attack, which she was claimed to be involved in. And, of course, it was all over the papers. Little girl left foaming at the mouth by horrific gas attack is one headline. Who could do this to these little children is another. Because, of course, the media is just the mouthpiece of this establishment core, this hidden hand. But I watched this interview with this little girl. And if she'd have been in a chemical attack, well, my goodness, she's recovered dramatically well. It's amazing how, like this daughter of the Russian agent who was said to be hit by this nerve agent, this lethal nerve agent in Salisbury, which has been blamed on Russia. She's left hospital. I mean, just a miraculous recovery. When you see, and I've watched a bit of this recently, when you see explanations by chemical weapons experts of the nature of these agents, these chemical agents, I mean, it's just the tiniest bit, almost minuscule, and you're done for. But she somehow has survived. And I watched this girl, and it wasn't just that there seemed to be no physical evidence that she suffered this gas attack, but her demeanor, her chatty, laughing demeanor, as she explained what happened, while she's looking off camera all the time, by the way, was nothing like you would expect from a little girl of 7 who'd just been through the horror of a gas attack and somehow survived. But then this starts to come into focus because as the Syrian army has pushed the Western-backed terrorists out of this East Ghouta area and this Douma area of that region where this gas attack was supposed to have taken place, then journalists have been able to come in, Russia Today journalists from their Arab stations, channels, and on the back of that, Western journalists from things like British newspapers and others. And suddenly the story is not of a gas attack. And this is quite consistent. I've watched interviews with witnesses, I've watched interviews with doctors on different channels and quoted by different sources. And there's a very big consistency in what they're saying, which fits the whole thing. And that is that a bomb did drop about that time, but it wasn't a chemical bomb, a chemical weapon. It was horrible as it is anyway. It was a regular bomb, shall we say. And it created a dust storm. And people have been sheltering in tunnels under Duma as the conflict went on between the terrorists backed by the West and Assad's military. And these doctors and witnesses say that people came to that hospital facility suffering from a lack of oxygen distress. There's a name for it which the doctors gave, and that while they were there, while the people suffering from this lack of oxygen were being treated, members of this White Helmets organization, this fake humanitarian group funded by the West and totally allied to the head chopping terrorists of the most extreme variety. Some of these White Helmets shouted gas, and everyone panicked. And in immediately, the White Helmets had the water coming out of the hoses, hosing people down, saying gas attack, gas attack, gas attack. And someone, just by chance, you'll know, was filming it. And so what you saw with this, here's footage of an Assad chemical attack, according to the doctors there and according to witnesses, was not a gas attack at all. It was people suffering from distress of another kind, nothing to do with a chemical attack, who were then drawn into a panic by the White Helmets, who shouted gas attack. And so it makes total sense, that explanation of the facts, which is that the doctors are saying we didn't treat anyone for a chemical poisoning because there wasn't a gas attack. And it explains why this little girl is so matter of fact and chatty and laughing and joking and around in her demeanor when she's talking about it. And the Russian government has claimed all along that this attack was a fake and didn't happen, and was used as an excuse, no problem reaction solution as I call it, to attack Syria. And that is, of course, exactly what happened. And on the back of that, you have the exploitation and use of the usual demonization of Russia by connecting Russia to Assad, and thus being responsible also for a gas attack that clearly didn't happen. And if we had a media that even approached the definition of journalism, these people would never get away with it. But instead, we've had the official line, apart from one or two who actually have turned up in Duma now, that the terrorists have gone. and are able to move around and ask people questions. Apart from those tiny few, the rest of the Western media has just supported everything. And not only that the government says, but not only that, they have attacked and slurred anyone who has the nerve to question the official story, even though it's quite demonstrably a pack of bloody lies. And of course, on the back of that, because as I keep saying that the plan is to go to war with Russia, and that's been all along, on the back of this has come headlines like this: experts fear hackers will hijack home computers for attack as the Russians take revenge on UK families for this attack on Syria. Tens of thousands of British families' computers have been targeted by Russia, potentially paving the way for a devastating cyber attack, security chiefs warned last night. They fear the Kremlin is trying to identify vulnerabilities, allowing it to lay a foundation for future offensive operations that could cripple Britain. Evidence for that, Larissa Brown, Defence and Security Editor of the Daily Mail. Well, the security chiefs told me. Yeah. From the same organisations that told you there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Remember that? Pathetic. Russia waging a cyber war against our banks, energy and hospitals. Ooh. Putin's hackers could target National Health Service and our homes. Oh, commentary. Mark Almond. Oh. And then there's this guy Max Hastings, who is for a long time, in fact most of his life, has been under the illusion that he's a journalist. And because you write for national newspapers for a long time, you're considered, oh no, he's a major journalist. No, he's not. Whenever I read his stuff, I shake my head. It's so inane in terms of being completely at odds with what's really happening. And he's written a piece this week. It's truly terrifying how many swallow Putin's lies. Oh, really? But you, Mr. Hastings, fake journalist, are quite happy to swallow Trump's lies and Theresa May's lies and Macron's lies, this little boy in short trousers who staggeringly is president of France. And that's not a problem. But, Putin, no, swallowing his lies. If it wasn't for, and I'm no apologist for Putin. I mean, if you run Russia, then you don't take prisoners. To run Russia for as long as he has, well, you obviously have a big ruthless streak. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do it. Such are the pressures to challenge that as you're on the way up and when you're there. So I'm no apologist for Russia, but I would say this. The demonization of Russia is so unbelievably over the top and made up. That's obviously an ulterior motive, and the ulterior motive is they are preparing public opinion and softening the public mind for an attack. And I would also say this: without the maturity of the Russian government, not just Putin, but his outstanding foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, we'd probably be in World War III by now. If you had a trigger-happy, gung-ho Russian government, we would be in World War III already. And not only that, without the intervention in Syria, Syria would now be completely occupied by the extremist of extremist proxy army for America, ISIS.